Hello there, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at the Lions Guide Collective. Make sound and timely decisions. So this topic that we're going to cover today was first exposed to me in the Marine Corps. That's one of our leadership principles that were taught in the early stages, fresh off the yellow footprints. And so today we're going to talk about the pros, cons, and importance of being decisive in all things, because all things have to do with leadership, and all things you are the leader. So if you don't know, this is your first time here, I'm Dale Walls. I'm the founder of Lions Guide, and here on the collective, I'm joined by the Lions Guide team. And this week, I'm joined by our leadership development director, Keith Flip Griffin. We call him Flip. That's why I always stumble over his name. You guys know him as Flip. I know him as Flip. We're probably going to stop calling him Keith because he's freaking Flip. He's the flipper man. Anyways, so listen, what is Lions Guide? So Lions Guide, we're all about, the important empowering people to be better leaders. So your leadership is what enables you to accomplish your goals in your career, your business, your life. And we're here to empower you to be a world-class leader, not Jeff Bezos, but in your world, right? Everything that you do, how you lead, will take you where you want to be. So if you could use more certainty in your life and you don't have the growth or traction towards your goals and what you want, we're talking about your leadership. If you're a business owner or executive that needs your team to execute on your goals and objectives, we're talking about your leadership. If you run an organization and you need all the teams to successfully align and accomplish the mission, we're talking about leadership. Leadership is going to be the root of success in all of these areas. So if you could use some help leveling up in any of those areas, be it with leading yourself or leading others better, I invite you to visit us at lionsguide.com and book a call to talk about how we can help you. So with that all said, we'll jump into the show with Flip. Flip, how's it going, my friend? What's good?
Good, brother. How are you? I'm doing well. I like this one. This one's a good one. Came up recently in kind of everyday life, and I thought it was a really good. It's something that leaders struggle with, and of all kind of shapes, and it can get out of hand, right? You can go from there's a sweet spot for being decisive, and I think that'll be something that we talk about. But I think there's definitely pros and cons and importance that I really I thought was a good thing that we kind of discuss.
Yeah, no, and I think it is. It is. I was once we kind of settled on the topic, I was kind of throwing some like immediate hits down, but I'll let you lead the way on this today. Like, why this one? Why now? What's what's the impact of being decisive? What's the
Yeah,
pros and cons?
I think. Listen, we talk about leaders who are wishy-washy about subjects and maybe wash them over because they don't want to handle them. They don't know the uncomfortableness of what it needs to be. But the truth is that, from multiple standpoints, so let's just take from your people, right? Like your people need you to make a decision on something, whatever that is, right? And there's quotes out there. There's a Bonaparte and Amelia Earhart and MacArthur. They also, and Lee Iacocca, they also some great things about being decisive, and they all kind of meant the same thing. That look, it's sometimes even better to get to an answer and to make a decision than it is to just sit there and not make one, right? Even if you make the wrong one, sometimes it's there's so much surrounding that decision that you're not taking into account, right? If you're the leader and you're thinking about, well, I need to make this, whether it's, hey, let's make this decision about X, whatever it is. The truth is, though, is that that's one piece, right? So like the decision to do whatever you're going to do is one part of that. Well, the second part of it is now how does it impact everyone behind and in front with that decision? And then your inability to make that decision and it hanging in limbo also has consequence that you don't always take into account when you're a leader because you're thinking about just that one thing and what's sitting in front of you. And so listen, I'm not here, and I don't think either one of us would make an argument to say that you don't go and make informed decisions, and that does sometimes take time, right? And we are by nature an impatient species that just we want things as fast as we can get them. And you mentioned Bezos, and he like I want a book. It's going to be at my door, and by the end of the day, like, right, we're impatient with that thing, and we do stuff. But the rationality of making a decision, an informed decision, is that you could make, like, you want to make the best decision that you can with the information that you get. We've seen very consequential decisions made by leaders that have had huge tolls. Like, you could take Powell and you can look at his decision to go on the UN and talk about weapons of mass destruction. To this day, and God rest his soul, he said it was, he wished he would have made a little bit more of an informed. He knew he had what he had, but didn't sit right with him. But he had to decide. He had to make a decision for numerous reasons for those things. And that's at some high level that we're talking. And the consequences were that we went. It was what it was. But just in the fact of being decisive in your actions says a lot. Like, it says to people that you're confident, right? That you're, and again, they can't be some rogue off the wall type. Like, people understand that too, when you're just, you're cowboying it up and you're just, shooting, you're just wild out in the dark, shooting from the hip is what we used to say. Like, there's a much different thing than making really decisions that are very decisive in nature, right? Like, that's important, I think, when you think about it in the overall. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't, it takes me always to like the simplicity of the way the Marine Corps taught it to me, right? Because if you talk about like make sound and timely decisions, right? And look, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. But when it talks about it doesn't say make decisions as fast as possible, right?
Correct.
It doesn't make like just pick one. It says make sound, which kind of talks to the level of information, like directionally accurate, align with the mission. Be intentional, right? Like make sound decisions, but make them timely. And that also may mean like you're in a situation you need to make a decision right this second with what you've got, or you may need to slow down and make a sound decision, right? So I really just love the simplicity. Am I saying that word? Simplicity. Man, I cannot talk today. Good for me. Make sound and timely decisions. Like the simplicity of that doesn't tell you one way or the other. It just says, you've got to be, this comes to clarity, because you're only going to have so much information. So I think you're reaching a point here about indecisiveness.
Correct.
Sometimes you've just got to decide to take some sort of action to learn, right? I often tell people, like, sometimes the decisions between right and right or wrong and wrong, and you're really not going to know better until you pick a direction and find out, and learn from there. So there's a time, like I said, my mind really started spinning when you texted me about this one today, because it's like, man, it's important. I think I love the cowboy shooting from the hip, and that's why I wanted to talk about like the soundness and timeliness piece, because I don't want to be misconstrued here to say, look, man, you just got to hurry up and decide.
No,
sometimes that's a mistake. Like, sometimes you've got to pump the brakes and slow down, because I guess what you've heard me say this a million times. People that have listened heard me say this. People that are clients heard me say this, right? To me, it always comes with, what are we solving for? Like, what am I solving for? And that always is at the core of my litmus test kind of like process of things, because that also tells you like when you need to make this decision. It gives you clarity of what kind of decision you're making. Because sometimes, like I said, you can't wait. You can't use the lack of decision as an avoidance tactic. I know I've done that, right? We're talking about difficult conversations or difficult, situations that we're slow to decide as a stall tactic, as a means of avoidance.
Totally.
There's so much here, man.
And
I mean, I love it. Those are like some initial thoughts pouring
yeah,
out.
I mean, you opened up a huge can, like the right versus right. We'll get back to that. Like, but remember something too. Like, there's all kinds of things that influence decisions that a lot of people don't know about, right? So if you're a leader and you're taking into consideration something, right? Whatever you're taking, whatever you have to just make a decision about, right? Let's do this for an example. Let's say you have an underachieving and underperforming an employee that you're like, man, we need to do something about this. I need to make a decision and make, and that decision is first and foremost to talk to that person, right? And you, right, if you're any kind of a good leader, you're going to hey, what's going on? What can we do to help? What are the challenges you're facing? Like, what's going on? Like, okay, let's figure this thing out. But like the decision, like what you don't realize in all that is that you don't realize like that your decisions have implications to everyone else, right? Like that decision to talk to that person and everybody knowing that, hey, this person's going to get talked to and they're going to get a full opportunity to, right? Like that implication down the road is like that. Well, I know now if I screw up, and not that I'm going to try, but if I do, I know that I'm going to get a fair, they're going to make a decision to come talk to me. They're going to make a fair shake at what's going on and give me the opportunity to fix what's going on. Because I mean, we're humans, right? We have things that happen all the time. But that decision, though, leads down and it sets a precedent, right? So if you think about your decision to make that, to hold that person accountable, but to be lenient, to be caring, to be benevolent, to be understanding, like that decision now that you just made is now carrying all the way to the world as you move forward with everyone else in a good way. Like they should be all like, man, this person has our best interest for us. It's and again, it's not a mistake-free environment. We're humans. Because here's the kicker. If you are undecided and you just go, well, it'll take care of itself. The problem then becomes is that you didn't do anything about it and it's your responsibility. So you didn't make the decision to do that, right? And now everybody else goes, they either go one of two ways. Either they go, well, why aren't they fixing that person? And then there's animosity, there's buildup in the environment and everything else. Then they go, well, or I can screw up. Doesn't matter now. Like, doesn't matter for me. Like the decision not to do that is like, and that's one of the main ones we see all the time is like, what? Go fix it. And look, I'm all about bitching on a Friday and cooling off on Saturday and Sunday and re-looking at a decision and going, okay, I'm looking at it with a clear head. That is sound to your point, and that is timely. Timely is that much. Like you see this all the time in sports where, an athlete will screw up and you won't hear, and people go, well, why haven't we heard from blah, 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 blah about it? Why haven't we heard from blah, blah, blah? And the truth is, that's our impatience as a society just wanting because we have social media and because like I need this immediately. No, you don't. Like there's a reason on both sides that it just needs to be, hold on, everybody take a step back. Let's get all the real facts. And that goes to your soundness, right? Because and this goes to another part, which is one of the most fun things I love. The hardest decisions you're going to make are not right and wrong. Those are easy and they should be easy. If they're not easy, we have a toxic leader on our hand if that one's not done. But the hardest decisions are right versus right and wrong versus wrong. Those ones are tough and you're going to have to make them. Like you're going to have to be like, ooh, what do I do? What do we do? What do we do here? Okay, we got to go what's best for, and then you figure it out from there, but making those decisions. So, but again, you can't just leave it as like, oh, well, it's both okay. Well, there needs to be something decided on that, right? Because there's a lot more surrounding it, like you talked about.
Yeah, and I think the other importance of this, like when we talk to timeliness, is that you got to know you're always on the clock. So you were hitting on this a little bit, right? Like you're always on the clock when the need for a decision arises, that clock is ticking, and it's important to understand and at least decide when you're going to decide by, because you're on the clock. Like the hamster wheel is always going, things are always moving. And I think you pointed out, like, I guess from a leadership role, and even like a personal, like lead yourself situation, right? If you're indecisive on when you're going to decide by, right? Like, hey, I'm going to move towards this goal, or I need to get my game plan together for whatever I'm going to do, or I need to solve this problem in the team. The longer you delay, and that ambiguity exists, other things are happening, right? Because you're not in this little vacuum.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's almost like the analogy of like if your situation is a garden and your delay is now the weeds are going to start growing, right? And the more you delay, and given the impact and severity of the decision to be made or the problem at hand or issue to solve for, those weeds are going to grow in accordance, right? So if it's a serious situation going on, them freaking weeds are growing fast. Like,
Right.
and you've got to decide and make action, because if you don't, them freaking weeds are they're going to take over your crop, and or you're going to have a hard time getting them undone, right? Because
Yep.
when problems are going on and you don't step in and start to solve them, decisively, they're going to start getting their tentacles into things, and they're going to start rooting in other things, and now you've got to go clean all that up. I think you got to always remember, like, you're on the clock. You got to factor the timeliness piece of this. I know we mentioned timely decisions, but that was kind of about, like, well, when do I have to have this decision made by? I'm kind of reminding you, but there is a clock, there
Right.
that clock is
Yeah.
always ticking.
Yeah. And the speed, like, and that is, again, that's not a, like, that could be a fictitious point of saying we have to do something. It's not just like they need a decision. They're giving us a 12-day decision. We need 12 days. We have to have the decision by then. That's not just what it is, right? Like, again, you talk
That's
about
a deadline.
it's
That's a deadline.
It's funny you bring this up, right? But, like, we talk about our kids and we talk about how they have this great imagination, and as adults, we probably sit around and we go, man, why can't I think like that anymore? Right? Like, how do they can see, like, a box and then see a race car in it, and and we're like, it's a box, right? Like it's a difference for us, right, as you get older. And we do things as adults to try to get to that headspace, right? A couple beers, whatever it's going to be. But the truth of the matter is we have really vivid imaginations, and where it goes is when we don't have decisions made. And then all of a sudden we go, well, what does that mean? Wait, what? Well, could he mean, oh, wait, what about, right? And we're really imaginative of how far down a rabbit holes we can go with things that aren't done. You talk about weeds. That's exactly what it ends up being, right? It ends up being we get very imaginative. We start thinking things that aren't true. We start listening and hearing things that we weren't given in that way, in that context. And right. And then it just breaks down after that. But listen, again, I have to say this, like, if you got to make a decision that's going to be longer, or it's going to require more information about, then, you go, again, a wise man once said something about honesty, consistency, and transparency. Let's be transparent then as a leader and say, hey, guys, listen, this is a tough decision. This is not something that I could make overnight. There's no reason to make it overnight. It's not worth it. It's more valuable if I don't. It'll help you out. And just tell people, and you may even want to allude to a little bit, if you can, about what the decision is going to be based upon, right? And really come out and say that. Are they going to believe you? You hope so. You've created that environment and that culture with everybody that they go, okay, we get that Flip's going to take his time with it a little bit, and why it has to happen like that. I think people don't do that enough, right? They keep the secret to themselves. They become what we used to call the what was it? The highest rank has the secret, right? Like you don't want to, like, just because you have the power to keep that from everybody doesn't mean you have to. And if you stay transparent, your decisions then become a lot more, I don't know, forgiving is not the right word, but people understand it more, right? They understand why a decision was made, and people are accepting. I mean, people don't like it if it doesn't go their way. Let's be all honest with that. But the truth is if they understand why it was like that, it's at least more palatable. And I'm not saying I'm not saying people like every decision that's going to be made in business. That never happens. But at least right? Like, if you're going to cut somebody or fire somebody, then be a leader and get, and don't 3,000 people fire at once with just a quick email or whatever, right? Like, you owe a little bit more than that, because that decision was made. And why was that decision made? People can understand if the decision's made going, we're going to be out of business if we don't do this. And unfortunately, you were a person that was expendable in this case. We're really sorry about that. We, blah, blah, blah. Here's your severance package, whatever. Like, that's at least better than, hey, if you're reading this, you're fired. You have 2 hours after like you just don't like.
But you're talking about clarity, right? Like,
Sure.
and
Yeah,
clarity
absolutely.
cures a lot of things, right? So if you're that leader that's just making decisions, announcing decisions, trying to move on, but you're not providing that clarity as to how you came to that conclusion, especially, again, is that needed to be for everything? Some things go without saying. So are we saying you got to explain yourself every nook and cranny? I mean, probably not. some things you just, it goes without saying that you needed to make that decision and you made it. But I think, again, you got to think about the impact. So if you eliminate someone from a team, or whatever, or you're deciding to move the family or whatever, right? You don't want to, like, hey kids, the house is for sale and we're moving to Cleveland.
Right.
Like there's impact there to, that is deserving of the respective amount of clarity. And
Right.
you're right. Like, you owe your team, your people, some understanding of how you came to that conclusion. And again, they might not like it, but what I found in those situations is, and I like you use the word understand, right? Like they might not love that, but they understand how you got to that conclusion. If you don't do that, now the debate never ends, right? The
Correct.
debate never ends, and they're always challenging. And there's always
The
the "I told you
imagination
so"
takes
or "I
over.
knew we shouldn't do this," right? And that's
Yep.
now, and you start to jump into some other areas of like buy-in and things like that, where people are a part of the decision-making process, so that when the decision is made, it's actually almost made in unison, right?
Sure.
And that's the importance of getting buy-in with when there's other people affected. But that's not to negate the responsibility of the appropriate leader to make that decision, right? So that's not like, hey, we all decided, and man, what'd you guys decide that for? Like there's not that either. So it's like I say, it's pretty deep topic. That's why I got excited about
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah, there's a thing too about precedent, right? Like when you make a decision and you're decisive about something and you're setting a precedent, right? And if that precedent, listen, people don't necessarily know what the precedent is set on from before. Like if they just got there, they don't know. They just know that that's their first milestone for you as a leader, that you just made that decision. Now, if you don't give any insight to the decision making process, or you don't, and again, listen, I was in emergency medicine and in war. Like there's not a lot of things in life that you could tell me that or don't rank at least close to, right? The decisions that you have to make during those times that you would never have to make. And I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form there's not reasons out there that you're going to need to make fast decisions, but I'll even take a heart attack for you, right? Like if you took a true cardiac arrest in a hospital, like you'd be really surprised at how probably slow you think things are moving, even though it's not, right? Like, but there is someone that's doing a checklist, and you think to yourself, why would they be doing a checklist? Like we used to think that like had to memorize everything, and then I can remember it. And I was like, well, because the decisions in this things are very pre-planned to algorithms that have been tested that to give the best life expectancy, right? But when you start to go into like, and I've always loved this, like if you're a decisive person and you make a decision, remember the precedent that you're setting, right? And so if you don't explain and understand it a little bit and give it to them to digest a little bit, the problem is that something else is going to come up later on. And if you hadn't explained or you haven't given something, and not everything deserves it. I'm not what the book is 3/4 to almost open all the way, right? There's a little bit that I get you have to from things. But if you do that, what you end up doing is that way when something next happens, there's an expectation to say, okay, there's we expect this then, right? Like we've talked about before. Like if I screw up and I know that the precedent is that I'm going to get talked to, I'm going to get a chance to fix myself, then I don't worry so much about, and then my imagination doesn't go off into some other place of going, oh my God, I'm going to be fired. I need to, right? What am I going to, like, it's just a spiral. Like that doesn't need to happen, right? Over decisions. So we're really talking surrounding decisions, what needs to be kind of involved in it. And that's just, again, you're creating an environment. If you have a great environment, people, you can go from not having to tell about your decision to like, because you start off by just not really, then you get into the creating your environment where you're like, hey, I want to make sure that I give everybody the explanation. And then you get to the point where you're like, people know, hey, we know Flip's going to make a good decision for all of us. You don't need to tell us about it. Like you've reached that crescendo, if you will, of like, yeah, now it's the leader that we trust. We know Flip can talk for us anytime. Like that's just, it's, you just kind of build towards that.
Yeah, and I think like you've mentioned precedent a few times, and I think it's also important to acknowledge the dichotomy that precedent also isn't the law, right? Like now we know law works that way. If there's absent a law, right, they default to precedent, right? But the important thing to acknowledge in your decision making is you need to learn from every decision, right or wrong, right?
Sure.
So, if
Yeah.
you make a decision and the outcome is desirable, you got to go, hey, okay, now I kind of start to build some consistency in how I'm going to handle situations like this in the future. But every decision, you're going to learn something from it, right? So when you make this decision this time, that employee challenge or whatever, and you make a decision to act, right? Pick between right or wrong, or you don't really freaking know, but you're deciding your course of action. You've got to learn from that so that if and when it comes up again, you're going to reference that and go, look, well, this is what I learned dealing with this last time. And last time I really screwed that up. And that's another part of transparency to go, look, guys, I know the last time this happened, we went in this direction. And here's the learnings from that. This goes back to the transparency piece, like to explain,
Yep.
like, hey, we did this before, and this is what I learned. I hope we all learn from this. So this time, this is what we're doing, right? So precedent helps when you're doing the right things, or at least demonstrating learning. You're starting to establish consistency. But when things are maybe volatile, that transparency part becomes important, because there is the decision whiplash, right? There's leaders like chasing this squirrel, and now we're chasing that squirrel, and today we're blue, and tomorrow we're red. And that causes that lack of consistency, and now your team, your people, your family, whatever it is, your goals, your goal boards freaking got whiplash. We're all over the map. So you want to be learning from your decisions in an effort to be consistently going towards where you want to go.
Sure.
I think the other part of transparency I wanted to point out before I forget is that is sometimes the level of transparency is just when the decision is going to be made. Like, because sometimes we know there's a situation going on or a decision that needs to be made. And just because maybe you don't have the answer right now, or you're not ready to make the decision, I think another important piece of being a good leader is to acknowledge a decision needs to be made, and here's what to expect as relates to that
Yes.
decision, right?
Yep.
Because there is that, like, hey, I can't make that decision right now, but it's okay to say that. Like, hey,
Right.
actually,
Yeah.
thanks for bringing this to my attention. I need to chew on this for tomorrow. In fact, let's circle up tomorrow, or let's make time Friday,
Right.
or whatever,
Yep.
so we can discuss this, or I'll have an answer to you by, or whatever. So there's another layer of, setting expectations that really is helpful in, that the phase of lack of decision, right? Because
Right.
absent that, again, the team is in that area of they don't know, so everyone fears the unknown, right?
Right.
So when they don't know, right? We all know a decision is to be made, but they don't know when. That's the it's a problem, right? They
Yeah.
don't know. They're in they're in limbo.
Yeah,
So
and that's right. That's being a good leader, right? Of saying, "Hey, look, this is what we don't know," and there's a lot of information, and a lot of it is look, this is too important for me to make this decision right now. I know you want a decision to be done right now, but like maybe you're not thinking rationally because it's a major thing, or it has some major impact, right? Or somebody may be thinking like that, right?
yeah,
But the truth is that like if 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 they trust you enough to bring that problem to you, then they should trust you enough to again, thoughtful, timely. Like it can boil down to that, about saying, look, I can't make this decision in this time frame that you want. Here's what I'm willing to give you. I'm willing to tell you that I'm going to take the week to think about it. And I know that's, I know you need an answer right away for this things, and find out, be informational about them, right? Are there deadlines attached to what decision that you're making that you don't know about, and how? That's the other thing too, right? If you're coming at, this is kind of this is a leading up perspective, but if you're coming and you're bringing a problem and a potential solution to your leader, because remember, they're doing it, your subordinates are doing this to you as well. Like, just be thoughtful about saying, okay, I'm going to give somebody enough time to make a decision of that, right? If you want me to be decisive, give me the time to do that. If you're giving it to me at the last minute, if you're giving it to me with, and I know sometimes emergent wise things happen like that, but give the proper time, because I know I'm gonna, like, again, different perspective. I can remember being younger and we used to have really good ideas, or what we thought were, and then you got got to some level of up, up the chain, and it was like, that's not important. And you're like, well, it's important to me, or well, it shouldn't be like, again, it's a priority fixing thing at that level. But the decision, right, you're at some point, right, there needs to be time to do that. And I think that's an expectation. But again, when you set the expectations, you're setting the environment. And I just think that the environment around you changes every single thing that you need to do with leadership. Not that you don't have to go earn it, not that you don't have to do it, but it's just, dude, it's so much better to operate in an environment that is good for leadership, right, than an environment that kind of struggles with leadership, right? Because there's been we've seen it, I think, places that it's just really hard to be a leader in. Like, it's hard to be in this sector or whatever, because, right, there's so many dynamics that maybe aren't leadership friendly, if that makes the case, but they got to be done too. So those require just as much decision process and decision making as any other place.
Yeah, and I think you're diving a little bit into, we talked about the importance earlier of deciding to decide, right? Like
Right.
deciding when you're going to make a decision by, but you're actually hitting on the other end of that, where someone's putting unwarranted an unwarranted sense of urgency on a decision, right?
Right.
And you can
Right.
challenge that and go, hey man, like, why do you need this answer right now? Like, when do you need this by? Because you touched on this in the beginning, right? Which we're impatient, right? So you'll have those personas that send you an email, and then they pick up the phone and text you and go, hey, did you get my email? Like, in like, there's that pressure. And so you've got to have some tactics to kind of like not answer every single call or be in whiplash decision making, where you got to go, hey, is this important right this second? Like, when do you need this by, or what are you solving for? Again, that's why that is kind of burned into me, because if you can answer that question, that's not a yes or no question. Like, what are you solving for? And it's hey, I need to get this out by tomorrow. That sets the precedent. Or it's
Correct.
it's March, and they go, well, by the end of the year, this is going to happen. Okay, cool. Well, how about we set time next week? And because it's important to have a gauge to determine the urgency, to kind of be able to not say no, or not like push people off, but again, give them that clarity of
Right.
first to understand, hey, what's going on? Oh, this is going on. It's going to happen in December. Great. Or this is going to happen tomorrow. Great. Okay. Well, then be understood. Okay. Well, this is when I can handle this situation.
Because you got to remember too, like, when you get to the leadership position, you may not be the expert in whatever someone's bringing you. They may be the expert in that. And so but you still may be the ultimate decision maker about that, whatever that's going to be. And I think it's always important. And this is actually where leaders struggle sometimes, is that they get back into the weeds of where they used to be, and they're right. So they stay
that's
technical.
a comfort zone thing, right? That's comfortable to make those decisions. You made them 1,000 times.
Right. But now you're in the other seat, and you have, right. You didn't know that before. And I've learned that lesson the hard way, until I was in the seat that I was like, well, why is this person not like I should be? And it was a really humbling moment when I figured it all out, and the perspective of that person changed, and his decisions about what he was making, sometimes they were ill-informed by me, but I was requesting how fast can I do this? I want to, right. And I wasn't clear about why I was doing what I was doing. And I wasn't doing it for bad reasons. I was doing it for learning purposes in my case. But like, again, his decision was, well, wait, why does this need to be done right away? And looking back on it, I don't tell you that I didn't put the urgency I had was probably way more because of me than what it really was. But, again, I think that it just leads back to everything, right? Information, timeliness, like those are all, but, and be transparent about it. If you can be transparent about all that stuff, then I think you're going to, the whole decision-making process and being decisive about making decisions within your company becomes so much clearer to everybody then about, oh, okay, we know that this is going to happen like this because it has before. Talking about precedent, we expect this outcome, and if it doesn't come this way, we know we're going to get an explanation of as much as we can, because, right, like, so it's just it creates this environment of that you don't, almost decisiveness can go away, right? When you have that great environment, you don't necessarily need to be decisive in the terms of how we're talking about it. Yeah, people know when it is, and we're going to make that decision when there's clubs. I will say this: there's clubs like I look at the NFL free agency right now, and you know me, I'm a huge NFL fan, but I look at some teams who are very decisive about how they do their business. They don't seem like they're being spendthrift. I've been noticing some things about like the business end of it, because this is very much the business end of the NFL. And you just watch teams be very decisive and very pointed about what they do. And they tend to be the ones that were just in the playoffs, which is pretty interesting. So,
Yeah. And I think, something else that needs to be said that you're kind of getting into in a way is decide who decides, right? You don't need to make
sure.
every decision, right? You may
No,
have stuff come across your
not even
desk and you know
close.
what? And there's various degrees to think about there. Like, are you the right person to make that decision, or is it actually someone that's going to have a bigger impact on them or their goals or objectives than you, and therefore maybe you delegate that decision to them, or there's a lot to think about. Like I say, I think that's why this is a hot topic, and I think like to be successful in this area, and I'll let you have a final word and we'll wrap this up. But my final word on that is it's don't be afraid to be the fool. Like we fear, like it's kind of we'll hit on all of them. We talked about clarity, we're talking about leadership, but to hit on to be courageous here, right? Like you can't be afraid to decide, and it goes back to another litmus test question that's out of my handbook, which is what's the right thing to do. Well, always the right thing is to do is make sound and timely decisions, right?
Right.
So have the courage to make a decision with what and be ready to deal with the outcome of that decision and learn from it, right? So
Sure.
because the weeds are growing, the longer you delay, those weeds are growing, and that's always the case. So it's just, be courageous. Like, don't be afraid to be the fool, because if you're the type of person that can make a decision courageously with what at hand, with the intention of learning from that decision and getting better, what are you afraid of? Because you're going to be that person that says, yeah, man, I made that call and I found out that wasn't the right call and
Right.
I'm better for it. Right. There's nothing wrong with that. Take the call and
Yeah.
start looking forward and start getting better. So
Look, it's not that people haven't made decisions that have ruined their companies, or there is those decisions, but you
yeah.
could probably trace. I don't. I wish there were statistics that I could keep this on, but most of the decisions you make in your life are non-emergent, and they can take time and be thoughtfully, and even in business, very few things in business isn't something that you shouldn't go get educated before you make the decision about. That's I mean, very few. And yeah, seriously, like, and even if you're going to make and I'm not talking the difference of big decisions, right? Like, so big decisions, you plan for those, right? You plan for the big stuff. You surround yourself. You garner the most information about big decisions. So that's not really a decisiveness because they're coming, right? And that's not what we're talking about. And I think, to me, to sum it up and to wrap this up, I just think that when you're decisive, as long as you add thoughtful and transparent to that decisiveness, right? Like, I think you're ending up that you're fine. Like, and if you're a good business and you make the wrong decision, to your point, you're just gonna, okay, then what you should be doing is going, man, I learned from that one, and we'll never make it again, and you're gonna be better. Right.
Talk
And
about
that's
building trust, right? Like to
absolutely,
say,
absolutely.
I learned from that one. That
Yeah.
was wrong.
Yeah.
Probably one of the biggest trust building exercises you can do. Admit that you were wrong and you learn
Oh
from it.
my God. Huge.
I mean, and,
Huge.
I talk about people and their apologies all the time, and what like sorry isn't an apology. And this is an example of this, right? Like you made a decision, which was end up being a mistake, right? And what some
Right.
people ingenuinely go, yeah, sorry about that. To me, an apology is an acknowledgement of a mistake and disclosing the learnings from it in a commitment not to make that mistake again,
Or
right?
trying
So if
to.
you think about you made a bad decision, you can own that in that same manner to say, look, I understand that was the wrong decision. This is what I've learned from it. And since I've learned that, I'm not making that type of decision again. right?
Yeah.
Talk about trust. Like that's rooting your trust in, like, even yourself, or like, that's self-confidence, right? Is trusting yourself. If you're learning from your mistakes and you're acknowledging that you're not making those mistakes, you can stop beating yourself up, right? Les Brown calls this, like, you're still beating yourself up over stuff you did before, but you would never do that again. You're condemning an innocent man or woman, right? And I
Right.
love that line, because you're continuing to beat yourself up over something that you would never do again. That's how
Right.
you move on. You what I guess that's forgiving yourself, right? That's when the apology results into forgiveness, right? When those three boxes are checked, right?
Yeah.
And if you can do that, whether it's for yourself, your family, your friends, your team, whatever, man, that the trust, and it's just from the transparency, one of your big words, man, it's deep. It's I
Yeah.
steal your last word. Sorry about that.
No, not at all. No, you did great. No, I mean, you're right. It's a topic. I mean, we asked yesterday about getting one, and yeah, I had to take overnight to figure it out. And I was like, wait a minute, this is really, it's on the forefront of my mind when I talk about to leaders all the time. Like they talk about being decisive, and again, I think we get confused because you think that means, oh, I got to make something fast, and that's not. It's not the speed of you making a decision that makes it decisive. It's the fact that you're doing it, and that you're arming your people with the information that they need to know. And it's not everything. I'm not telling you to blab the entire world or about something. But if you're running if you're creating an environment, this is the last thing I say. If you're creating an environment of positivity, of inclusion, of just open communication between your people, like you can be as transparent as you think, as sometimes the law allows you to be. And I promise you it'll be okay. Like your people will respect you more because you're telling them, and you're getting buy-in from them without getting buy-in from them, right? It's just a smart thing to do. You don't hide anything, then you don't feel bad about not telling somebody this or that. And we've done that all the time. And there's times for it, there's reasons for it. I get it. But if you can make those decisions, listen, bottom line, you can make those decisions openly, and they will end up being very decisive for you.
Yeah. I love it. So yeah, man,
Yeah.
great topic today. So if you guys have any comments on that, please, whatever platform you're checking this out on, chime in. Let us know what you think, what insights you got from this today, what you loved about the conversation. And if it was any value to you, reach out. And if you're looking to improve in this area, again, leading yourself or leading your team better, or you need your team to lead better, encourage you to check us out. We got various different programs that serve all those different areas. So Mr. Flip, thank you, sir. And I'll see you on the
No
next
problem,
one.
man. Bye, everybody.